Welcome to the Second Bite Podcast, where we talk with top entrepreneurs and CEOs about creating valuable companies through creative transactions. Now, let's get started with the show.
Welcome back to the Second Bite Podcast. I am your host, Todd Tasky. Katy Hornaday is your guest today. Katy, so happy you're here.
Hi, Todd. Thanks for having me.
You know, I'm very interested in this episode because a lot of the times when we have people on that are founders and they're doing interesting things and growing great businesses and on and on. And your journey to being the CEO of Barkley OKRP has been different than what most of us or what I am used to most, which is somebody founds an agency, builds it, sells it to private equity, stays on board, on and on from there. You literally started out as a copywriter, right?
Technically an ACD by the time I got here, but yes.
Okay. Well, by the time you got here, but your career, a lot of people point back and say, "Oh, I've been an entrepreneur my whole life." So the journey is interesting to me. Number one. Number two, I'm hoping we can get a little bit of an insight into because we spoke before with your predecessor from Barkley, because the story was very interesting about how many private equity groups you interviewed and talked to before you landed on the good folks that you landed with at Keystone Capital.
Yep.
So that's what I would like to explore and just kind of talk about more. So maybe if you don't mind, could you set up first just a quick intro into the business itself? What do you do and who do you do it for? And then let's go into your journey as to how you got to the CEO of a pretty sizable business.
The good news is there are no topics I know better than those two.
Okay. Great place to start.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Barkley OKRP and what we are and just a little bit of where we sit in the universe of agencies. If you're familiar with the advertising marketing agency world, there are more agencies in our country than there are McDonald's. So if that gives you a sense of just, what an extremely, let's just call it saturated market it is. And partially that's because every client, every brand kind of needs something different from their agency partner. If I were to oversimplify the world of agencies, there are sort of two choices that, as I have said many times, is becoming more binary by the day. There are the holding companies, and the holding companies are buying up other holding companies and becoming bigger and bigger and sort of playing this scale game. And a byproduct of that in a lot of ways has been people who have either been let go from holding companies, people who are disenfranchised with holding companies, jumping off and starting lots of little independent agencies. So we have this sort of sea of very small shops, some of them like just, a handful of people. You have these giant holding companies, and Barkley OKRP, what we are is we sit like beautifully in the middle of it. We're about 700 people. We have 5 offices. We have, almost stretching up to 200 clients that we work with at varying degrees. And one of the things I'm most proud of is we've built over the last 18 months or so, a really spectacular media practice inside of our agency. So you have creative and strategy, and now you have this really robust media practice that has a ton of momentum behind it, all integrated under one roof, which is some of the calling cards of a holding company, but at a much smaller scale. So I like to say that, our vision is building an agency that is this perfect mixture of scale and soul. So never losing the soul of being an independent agency while still having that scale that lets clients have the sophistication they need, the tech that they need, the ability to get into lots of different places that are necessary for modern marketing to thrive, but without having to go all the way to the holdco, where if you're not spending, $200 million in media dollars, you're going to get lost in the mix of that.
So one thing that jumps to my mind is this, that for a big business, 700 people, for a big business, you talked about creative and strategy, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we get to business and a big business, I need somebody that's focused on, I don't need a creative running my shop. That's not going to turn out well. I think you double down with that if your owner's private equity. Yeah. So I'm curious to what the process was like maybe within Keystone, amongst the board, to come to a decision that we're going to have a quote unquote creative run the agency?
Yeah. So super fast background on me. Yes, you're right. Guilty as charged. Started as a copywriter, sort of came up. And I would say, while not a founder and not, probably a official entrepreneur, the thing that always got me about the agencies that I fell in love with working at was sort of this idea of building something. So when I joined Barkley then, almost 15 years ago now, it was in the middle of the country. They had Sonic as a client that had left just like a year or so before that. And they were really rebuilding what the agency would become. And I fell in love with this idea of being able to be part of a group of people who were going to define what the agency was. So then over the next 10 years, we really built this agency into something that it wasn't a decade before. And in that process, we had an ESOP at one point. A handful of us bought out that ESOP. And in that process, I became a shareholder, a 16 shareholders, so not a giant group. And so I ended up at all of these tables where we're talking about the business of our business. And I still to this day say one of my greatest assets is my willingness to admit when I don't know something, to play stupid. And so I just asked all the questions. Tell me what that acronym means. How does that connect to the thing that we talked about last time? And I found myself so intrigued by the business of what we do. At that point, I was running the whole creative team, which was 250 people, and I was running it like a business. So I was starting to get a little bit of the understanding of it, but certainly not all of it. However, then when we merged OKRP into our business, and as we started to stand up Mission One, we had 4 founders at that point who were running the business: Jeff, Dan, Tom, and Nick. Tom and Nick from the OKRP side, Jeff and Dan from the Barkley side. And the 4 of them always knew that bringing in PE and bringing in, OKRP was part of a plan for them to eventually move into the next chapter of their lives and their careers. And so from what I'm told, I wasn't there, but they were away and they started to discuss who was the right next person. And maybe they just tell me this, but they say it was unanimous. But Bill, who is our partner at Keystone, was also involved in this conversation.
Bill Summershield. Yeah. Bill's been on the podcast a couple times.
Okay. Well, and you know what's funny? In our world, PE for a long time was like a dirty word. And I was just telling someone the other day, I don't shy away from talking about the fact that we have PE backing. I'm really proud of having PE backing. I'm really proud of what it's done for us. And I said the other day, PE is only a dirty word when you choose the wrong partner. And so I have
very well said.
Endlessly grateful for the partner that we chose, for the relationship that we have, for the way that they support us, and frankly, the business that we've been able to build that we wouldn't have been able to without them. So yeah, they made this big, bold decision. And I will say I'm surrounded by people who are brilliant in a lot of ways, operationally, financially. So I'm not alone as a creative figuring out the business side of this. But yeah.
That's super insightful. 2 quick notes for those listening. Jeff King was on the podcast, I don't know, maybe a year or so ago. And your diligence into selecting a private equity group was fascinating. We had a very good conversation. So anybody listening, you may want to go back and check that one out because that was great. Bill Summershield's been on the podcast a couple of times as the PE sponsor. One of the things interesting about Keystone is that their fund, which is a sizable one, the partners of Keystone own 30% of their own money. 30% of that fund is invested in every single deal, which makes them, I think, more than just a private equity group. There, the money is precious from that standpoint.
Well, I think so. The other thing I'd add to that, Todd, is one, I'm a big caliber of the human being you're working with person, and the caliber of the people at Keystone, I'm constantly amazed by. Scott and the way that he looks at businesses and the way that he looks at Keystone. Bill, this incredible partner to us who really does believe in the value of our employees and what they do every day. That we're not a numbers game. Obviously, there are numbers involved, but I brought to him last year that I wanted to be able to add a supplemental mental health benefit for all of our employees. One, that they wouldn't have to pay anything out of pocket to have unlimited access to an ongoing therapist for them and their families. And when I brought it to Bill, he said, start it a month earlier.
Wow.
So I just the right PE partner helps you do the right things for your people and for your business. And when you do right by your people, you end up doing right by your business.
And so it's interesting because there's different relationships, like you said, right, that dictate win or loss, I think. The most of the good relationships that I'm familiar with, it is a joint approach towards building a good business. Bill doesn't show up one day and say, you should see the company we just bought. You got to integrate it. It should be wonderful.
Right.
I'm assuming that you guys have a board and here's where the puck's going and here's where we're going to be. Will acquisition be an important part of that? And if it is, which I believe, how do you guys kind of determine it? Are you trying to fill in gaps where you want to be stronger, or are you just trying to do more of the same in different geographies? Or maybe you could talk on that for a little bit.
Yeah. So when I took on my role officially in May, we started a project that I called the 3-year thesis. Where do we believe the industry is going in the next 3 years? And where do we believe we are excellent today and can build on? And what do we need in order to genuinely build a category of one as an agency? So we have really used that as our blueprint for the way that we're looking at M&A. So we are, short answer would be, we're not looking to add more. Mostly if we wanted to add more of something, we would be looking at excellent talent that we can hire and bring in. We're looking to add different capabilities we don't have, gaps that we have, but gaps specific to the vision of where we're going, not just opportunistic. So
what's an example of what that would be? The capability set or the gaps?
Yeah. So specific places that we're looking at right now are we would love more in the influencer creator space. Those are really relationship-based foundations that have a lot of value. Looking at things that are more in the e-commerce retail media network space from the media side of things. So again, we have a media practice. We have a content creation and an influencer practice. But these are sort of very specific gaps that we believe we could buy a little bit more scale into and would have a lot of value for the vision of this fully integrated kind of third choice in the market.
Right. And as a follow-up, so if you have that, and then you also, I assume, anticipate keeping the talent that comes with that and just giving those founders a bigger platform upon which they can, do their thing. Is that fair?
Absolutely. I think it's bringing in founders who can be key talent for us, who want to collaborate and integrate with the other talent and leaders in the agency, right? We don't have an interest in buying things and allowing them to operate like satellites. That's not our model. What we want is people who maybe have businesses that they have hit a ceiling of their ability to sort of function alone on an island. And they want to be part of a universe, part of an ecosystem of an agency so they can maximize how they can impact a brand, how they can, impact an idea, how they can impact a client's bottom line.
Yeah.
And so that's really key to it. You got to be willing to want to be part of a bigger thing, not just a small thing that's like an appendage.
Right. And then I would imagine in those conversations, you're talking to those entrepreneurs about your independent soul. And I don't know what they have, 50 or 100 employees or maybe less. How do you actually do that? How do you keep, and I think the mental health and wellness that you just talked about is one, it's very little, but I'm sure it's a little piece of a larger mosaic. Could you talk more about the larger mosaic and how you can feel confident telling somebody you'll maintain your independent soul?
Yeah. So I say that I use scale and soul as really guiding light for every decision I make, because I believe that our model has to have both. If we over-index in either direction, we become a small holding company or we become a bloated boutique agency. So we have to have both in equal measure. So to the point about the mental health benefit, that came up because when we sat down to say, what should our 2026 benefits look like? I asked the team to tell me what our scale benefits would be. Okay, so what healthcare are we going to get? What, who's our insurance partner? What are the things we need to do because we're a sizable company? And then what are our sole benefits? So we got to that mental health supplement. We got to a thing that we're calling work where you want weeks, where every year you get 2 weeks where you can work wherever you want. So the ability to be connected to the larger thing, but also have the autonomy to work somewhere that like maybe you want a vacation from there, but you're also willing to work your 9 hours a day. And there are a number of other benefits that sort of fit into this. Same thing when we think about even the operations of the company. How do we make sure that we both are creating processes that allow us to continue to scale, that allows 700 people to be connected and know what's going on, but also how do we use our soul to say, you got to be able to cut through some of the bullshit. You got to be able to find simpler ways that are speedier, ways that make people feel connected as human beings, not just as sort of cogs in a machine. And so really, I use it as a checks and balances to make sure that we don't go too far one way or the other.
It's interesting. I love the 2 weeks work where you want. My sense is that idea didn't come from you to say, wow, this would be cool. Let's let everybody do it. What's the mechanism you use to bubble up these ideas from your team?
So first we do a quarterly pulse survey where we really get in and ask, how are you doing? What's going on? And I'll be honest, we've had some serious reality checks of how people are feeling as you have 2 years of merging things together and you're building stuff and everybody's in constant change. I personally read all the open-ended comments. And what we heard was people still didn't love, we have a 4-day a week return to office policy. I kind of hate that term. I'm like, we are many years past the return, but we have a 4-day a week in office policy and some people were still struggling with that. And we believe that being in person was important for collaboration. But my ask to the team was like, okay, how do we kind of meet people where they are and what they're needing? And this was our solution to it. And it honestly did come up through a brainstorm. My background as a creative is not something I'm willing to let go of. So a lot of things are like, let's get into a room. Let's talk about the what ifs. What are the ideas that we build this business on?
You talk also a lot about the whole brand thinking. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah. So
that's a big differentiator in your world, right? In the way you present to the marketplace.
Yeah. So it's cool the way that it has evolved even with our agency model. So, that's something that we've honestly been talking about for almost a decade now at Barkley. And the belief is that every brand needs to get to a red thread. So that's not necessarily a tagline, but it is this central idea. The way that I like to talk about it is it's something that you would paint on the walls of your headquarters, and every person who would come in, whether they work, in the cafeteria or they work in the operations team or they work in marketing, they would understand what that piece of language instructs them to do every day at the core of the business. And then we say, once we have defined what that red thread is, it starts to find its way into the whole brand. And really that's because think about it as a consumer. If you see one thing on TV as a commercial and then you walk into a store and they decidedly act different than that, your belief in that brand falls apart. So the whole brand has to be operating in service of this central idea, what we call a red thread. So as we've really started to evolve into bringing in this modern media landscape and really thinking about how brands show up in the incredibly fragmented media landscape, we believe this red thread and this whole brand thinking is even more important than it ever has been, because you got to help someone understand what your brand is in 6 seconds. And in a single, comment or in a 30-second spot, but it also needs to talk about a promo at this point. And all of those things have to be tracking back to one singular core idea for your brand.
Interesting. Shifting gears a little bit, as the CEO, you're responsible, obviously, along with your partners, for the financial health and wellness of the business. Mm-hmm. As a creative, do you notice that you look at the world, for example, differently than Jeff did, or differently than Bill does?
I look at it slightly differently, but I think, Jeff and Dan, I worked alongside them for 13 years and they ran an incredibly responsible business. And so that is what I've seen up close. And so that is what I know. And so I'll say that, there's certainly no let's just take uncalculated risks because I'm a creative and see what happens. We want a very, very healthy business. But I would say some of the places where I've shifted some of our investment are places like in our recruiting team. I really believe that talent is the future for us. And so making sure that we have a great bench of recruiters who are not only finding great talent for our opens, but a pipeline of talent as we grow and as we, evolve in places like our people team. So, I guess I don't necessarily look at the health of the business in a different way, but maybe there have been some places where I believe it's valuable to overinvest, particularly at this moment in time. But I would say Bill and I are very aligned in that way. And that's been the most interesting thing about the relationship with Bill is he is my business partner. I talk to Bill almost daily. Yeah. And I have a really great partnership with him. And he really knows the ins and outs of a business. And I know the ins and outs of my industry and my business. And so it's a really great, I think, way for a creative to be able to be a great business leader and learn a lot from him.
It's also helpful, again, having spoken with Bill many times and with Jeff and the quote unquote competition for the PE group to acquire Barkley at the time. It makes a lot more sense hearing this now in through the rearview mirror as to why Keystone was your selection, particularly when you talk about the problem with private equity is not private equity, it's how it matches values and perspectives and the rest. So that kind of completes that circle well for us. Tell me about Mission One Media. And I'm assuming it grew out of Adlucent to some degree, that acquisition that you did. Can you talk on that a little bit? And do you still use Adlucent as the backbone to that business?
Yeah, it actually grew out of a couple of things. So at Barkley, we had a formidable media practice, but it was much more baked into the agency as opposed to feeling like it could stand on its own. Then we acquired Adlucent. And then on top of that, we brought in Sean Corcoran. So Sean was the CEO of Media Hub, which is the $300 million media company that was part of IPG. He had known us, had a relationship with Jeff. And so he came in and under his leadership, really, he has taken Adlucent. He has taken that sort of media team that was part of Barkley. He's brought in a whole other additional leadership team that really has filled in some of the gaps that we had and really built it out as something that can both stand alone. Like I say, our pipeline right now is a third. So we have a third of what's coming in is just creative and strategy. A third is fully integrated and a third is just standalone media opportunities already in a little over a year. So Sean has really built it out as a brand that sits inside of a brand and things that we've used from the Adlucent acquisition, obviously, a collection of clients that came with Adlucent, a ton of great performance marketing talent there, as well as a number of tools that they had either built or started to build. So this last year, we launched a thing called Refinery. And what Refinery does is it can actually look at creative assets and give you an understanding of specifically what's working about those creative assets, meaning instead of going A/B testing and never really knowing what is making something work and making something more successful, it can look at everything in a collection of assets and go, actually, when you feature a hand with a bracelet on it, you get more click-throughs than you do when it's a necklace or when there's no hand and the bracelet is by itself. So it actually tags a number of elements in the creative all the way down to the mood. And it can say when things are a little more happy or joyful, it performs better. So that is a tool that the beginnings of it had started from Adlucent, and we were able to build on that and really craft it into a tool and a product that we can sell. So there's been a lot that's been, Adlucent as the foundation that's been built into Mission One.
And so if you, on your next acquisition, whether it's in influencer, e-commerce, or whatever the case may be, would you anticipate kind of going that founder having the same opportunity to plug into great technology and to add capabilities and to do things that as a smaller shop, perhaps they were unwilling to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we want people who if you're a founder and you're going to come be a part of this, we want you to bring that entrepreneurial spirit and help us continue to build. Like, we are still so much in our building era. And we want to add smart, talented people who know their specific slice of the world so well that they can bring that in and they can make us all smarter and they can help us, really scale this thing to the place that we think it really can. I mean, Todd, I'll say, you've introduced us to some folks, and so much of those introductions have been the right trappings and just maybe not the right time, but the tenacity to build something, to be smart, to want to scale something beyond what you have at your fingertips, and people who are really hungry and excited about what we're building is key. And
so I think you touched on a couple of them. Two-part question. How do you know, what are the attributes you're looking for in that founder? What are the attributes you're looking for in the business that might reflect the founder? And how do you tell the truth through the fiction of a deck and the quote unquote right words they've been coached up to say?
Yeah. I think some of it is having multiple conversations and sort of reading the energy of how someone engages and interacts. I have found, again, in a short time frame compared to as many as you have seen, I think you can tell a lot about the way that a founder engages based on how they ask or answer questions, or sort of even the way that someone interacts in a discussion. You can sense if they're a collaborator or if they're somebody who only knows how to lead. And so I think looking for those small signs is key. I really think that the quality of the human is probably the most important. And so I think it's a lot of conversations. I think it's looking for the small details. I think it's asking for, access to see the real. It's funny, in this space, everyone's really great at marketing. So they can build a great deck and they can tell a great story. But when you're like, hey, could you open that for me? Could you actually show me how that thing works? Some of them are great and they absolutely can, and they'll show you how it works. And others are like, yeah, we can set something up. So I think it's just getting in. And then I would say, as you get closer, spending a lot of time, a lot of interpersonal time, and asking the hard shit.
And what's an example of that?
Your company name is going to change. Are you going to be okay with that? Hey, here's the org chart. Let's get real about where you're going to fit into it. Are you going to be okay with that? How is that going to look? And then not even just with that founder, but also with the people on the team that's going to change their function.
That's a question I'd like to ask. So you've got a great business that operates well with great margins. And now you're going to roll an unknown quantity into that has told you all the right things. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about how that person is going to report to and disrupt that group or add to that group? There'll be some disruption that is part of it, right? How do you factor all those points together?
I think in some cases, some acquisitions we're looking for would be intended to be disruptive, and that's okay. Meaning that there might be things that we need to really shake up and evolve and change. But again, I think that's where it's not just testing that founder, it's also testing the people on our side of the fence to understand, if they are clear on the vision of what we're trying to build and how important it is to sort of embrace some change and embrace new leadership or new partners in that. We haven't made a significant acquisition since I've been in my role. So I have been doing it mostly as part of the leadership team. But I would say, I think all of us learned things along the way. I would say when we brought on OKRP, we did a really great job of having summits and bringing everyone together. We were a room of...
I'm sorry. That was a pretty big acquisition, right? Comparatively, size to size, it was almost equal.
We were 500 and they were 150.
Okay.
People. So, not entirely the same size, but it was important because we were going to be merging the brands together because of the brand equity. So they were going to be sitting alongside one another. We were trying to find the right assortment of the leaders and how they would all fit together. So we had 2 days in Chicago before anyone knew or before even the deal was signed about like the leaders, the next level of leaders all sitting together, like 20 of us, and really having to wrestle with like, what are we going to build and how is everyone going to fit into this?
How often do you talk about the name? Does it change at some point? I mean, it doesn't roll off the tongue.
I know.
It does have a vibe to it.
Yeah. We've talked about it. The way that I have viewed it at this point is we have so much ambition for so much that we are changing that's not the number one battle on my list. But yeah, it was I often joke that it's not what I would have recommended a client to do. But the hard part is we were taking two really strong agencies that had really strong relationships, even just with their own clients. And you look at what's happened with the holding companies. With the holding companies, Omnicom comes in and buys up another holding company and then gets rid of a bunch of their agency names. And that seems like not a big deal. But if a client hired an agency and suddenly it disappears, there is a feeling to the worth of that agency. And so I think at the end of the day, maybe not the most obvious decision, but I think we made the right one, at least for now.
Excellent. We're kind of bringing us to close here. So we're in January now. We get to the end of the year. There's a lot of measures of success. When you think about the M&A and the growth of the business, is it important to do an acquisition? And I'm assuming if the answer to that is yes, it would be something in the influencer or e-commerce space. Or are there other things you're considering as well?
We have a list of priorities. Those are probably the two at the top of it. But what I would say is I wouldn't say this year was a success or failure if we make an acquisition or not. I think that what we're constantly looking for is the exact right acquisition. Right now, I think we have everything to be a force at the moment, and we are looking to add to that. But I wouldn't make an acquisition just to have scale.
Check a box.
That goes back to this scale and soul thing, right? We don't want just scale for scale's sake. We want it to be for the right reasons, with the right people who value what we're building. And I
think it's also easier to find the round peg that fits in the round hole when you've identified what one of those components is.
Exactly.
Right. Because then you can test them more easily, more rapidly, more quickly. And the entrepreneur that you're talking to can say, well, I would never do that. Or this is the home I've always been looking for.
Yes. And I think when we have had great conversations with great founders, the right ones really light up at the idea of being able to take something they've built and that they feel really, they want to protect. And I think that they feel like if they can become part of something that cares that much about the soul, that they would be able to have that scale while not giving up the thing that they have felt is so special about what they've, built themselves. So
I think that's a perfect place to leave us off. This was exactly the episode that I was hoping for, Katy. So thank you for that. I would love to reconnect in a year or two and see how you are fulfilling on that 3-year plan, watch the team grow. All of your contact information will be in the show notes.
Awesome.
And you're easily found on LinkedIn. Is there any other way you'd want people to reach out to you, or are those the best?
LinkedIn's perfect. You can drop me an email, or you can always find Bill.
Yes, you can always find Bill Summershield. We will now put Bill Summershield's contact information in the show notes as well. So, and you can reach Bill easily, probably more easily reach Bill through me than you could trying to reach Bill directly. But Katy, this has been insightful and thoughtful and helpful. So thank you and best of luck on 2026.
Thanks, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Second Bite podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.